Oh, baby, this trade rhetoric is getting a little wild, is getting a little crazy, is getting interesting out here between Canada and the United States. And it is fascinating, isn't it? We put so much time and effort into Trump and the United States, and we just let, that dictatorship across the Pacific just off the hook for everything they're doing in China. It is fascinating to watch, but we will be covering the fact that with Jasmine Lane's interview with the U.S. Ambassador Pete Hawkstra, he had some things to say about the relationship. He had some things to say that people didn't otherwise know. And people were freaking out about that yesterday. Both the left and the right were like, what's going on? What is happening? We'll be covering all that, exactly what he meant, likely, not saying I'll be putting words in his mouth, but I broke down what he had to say. And there is some nuance to it. And hopefully you can bear with me because I think it is important. But we'll be touching on that, and as well as Ontario's response to these tariffs. And right now they're raising the white flag for the most part without saying they're raising the white flag. And Mr. Doug Ford really just kind of selling out all Ontarians at this point in time, saying that he's saving them, but actually screwing them in the long run. We'll be covering that and this and so much more. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow, helps us get to new audiences, and helps people see there's something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, let's get into our first story, shall we? So, CBC covered Jasmine Lane's interview with Pete Hawkstra. There's one moment in that interview that really got their attention, got the mainstream like, whoa, our viewers in terms of our clicks and getting people angry. This is going to be great. And that was the fact that Pete Hawkstra uttered some statements yesterday or 2 days ago in that interview that aired that got people scratching their heads a little bit, and they're a little confused, and there's a lot to get into. And, well, let's just play it out without any further ado, shall we?
Ambassador to Canada has a warning for Canadians. Pete Hawkstra says the way this country is responding to U.S. tariffs is threatening the future of our free trade agreement. Here is Hawkstra speaking to podcaster Jasmine Lane.
Some of the retaliatory tariffs to the U.S. Are a huge irritant. We have protected the integrity of CUSMA. Okay, our negotiators have said we are not going to implement tariffs on any products that are covered under CUSMA. Canadians have said, those guardrails are off. Canada is calling into question the future of CUSMA. It's not the United States of America. It's Canada.
So he said it pretty clear right there, didn't he? That Canada is calling into question CUSMA or USMCA. And this was a concern because that's kind of what the rhetoric has been, was what we talked about, right? The whole thing during the election campaign between Mark Carney and Poilievre was, we'll get a deal done. I'm the guy you call in a crisis. Well, we'll get a deal done with Trump immediately, yada, yada, yada. And that whole deal, that got pushed off time and time again. More deadlines until we got to August 1st. And Trump said the deadline is a 35% tariff on all goods that are not under USMCA or CUSMA in this case. And, well, that's kind of what we're at. Because at this point, since that happened, August 1st, it's been a little quiet on the Canadian side. Little quiet. And little whispers here and there, but not a whole lot going on. We're just wondering, this is what's going on. So we finally did hear that silence was broken. Carney says he's going to be subsidizing the softwood lumber industry to the tune of $1.2 billion. Then you have the likes of Algoma Steel, who was asking for subsidies. Then you have Mr. Doug Ford announced yesterday that Ontario is launching a $1 billion financing program to shield key industries from U.S. tariffs. And Doug Ford's exact comment on it was, we're keeping our promise to protect Ontario workers from President Trump's tariffs. Our new Protect Ontario financing program will help keep businesses operating and workers on the job as we build a stronger, more competitive Ontario economy. And baby, does this not sound like COVID era lingo? Don't worry, we'll make sure you're employed. Make sure we'll just continue shelling taxpayer money to protect our industry as we can't figure anything out. And now, as I said, the rhetoric has moved in from we'll get a deal done to, okay, we'll start financing all these industries that are getting hit by tariffs right now, and then we'll figure out USMCA CUSMA next year. How about we figure that out now? Like, what is holding us back? What's holding it back right now? From you just being the man in a crisis, dealing with what needs to be dealt with, and getting USMCA CUSMA renegotiated now? What's holding us up? What's holding us up? I know that was Poilievre's promise during the campaign. That's what he would do. What's keeping Carney from doing that? If this is becoming so diabolical, becoming so hard, why are we not doing that now? Is it because we don't have the upper hand? Is it because we're getting smoked right now? And yes, you can call me a traitor. You can say, yo, you're not really Canadian. You're fake Canadian. You don't stand with Canada. I'll be honest. Pete Hawkstra is hopping on shows like Jasmine Lane, hopping on CBC, CTV, and he's getting the rhetoric out of what America wants and what they desire. Mark Carney could hop on Jasmine Lane's show. Mark Carney could hop on this show. A representative from the Liberal Party can hop on any of our shows. We're not gotcha people. I can speak for myself and Jasmine specifically. We will never engage in a gotcha interview. We will ask tough questions. We'll ask the stuff that people want to know, but we're not going to just try to get clips and bait you like media on the left likes to do. We're actually honest people, but Mark Carney and his team could hop on media and explain what is going on. At this point, Canadians have heard more from the American side on this negotiation than the Canadian side. So that leads us to believe that there's something to hide, or two, we are getting smoked in these negotiations and it's worse than we think it is. What is happening right now? Why is the rhetoric shifted from we'll get a deal done to end these tariffs to we'll wait till renegotiation of USMCA and CUSMA next year? Why did that change? It is fascinating. And then CBC's show decided to do a whole thing where they had panelists come on and talk about how what Pete Hawkstra had to say here was completely and factually incorrect. And here's just a taste right here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was remarkable listening to the interview. You had the sense that he was recounting an alternative history of what had happened in terms of the notion that Canada had somehow attacked the United States using tariffs, when in fact, of course, we know that the tariff war that was launched by President Trump hit Canada first and hit Canada hardest of all of the U.S. trade partners. I was also really struck by the fact that his tone and his comments about CUSMA are increasingly pointed, and you really have the sense and the idea that there is a threat implied there, that if Canada doesn't come to heel on some of these irritants, as he calls them, like the retaliatory tariffs, that CUSMA itself, which of course is what's providing the bulk of protection to Canadian trade right now, might be in jeopardy.
And as I said, there's three panelists here. There's two in the seats here who are liberals, and then you have the woman on the screen here who works for Crestview Strategy, who is quote unquote a conservative, at least claims to be. But all three of them shared the same sentiment throughout this segment, that Hookstra's lying. This is an alternative reality. This is simply not true. And the problem is both sides are very loved. Like, that's just where we live now, right? Social media. Everything's black and white. It's got to be, hard hitting, sensational. That's how it all works, right? The problem with this story is it's not quite like that. What Pete Hawkstra had to say wasn't necessarily not true, but also it just comes with a lot of nuance. So when it comes to the issue of CUSMA, or USMCA in this case, if a country in this agreement wants to tariff goods that are are protected under CUSMA, they have to incite what they call Chapter 31 of the agreement, where they have to get a third party involved and see if they have proper reasoning to be able to tariff these goods that are under this agreement, which is Chapter 31 of CUSMA, or USMCA. In this case, Trump actually bypassed that. Instead, he actually incited Chapter 232 of the American law, saying if there is an element and breach of national security, then he has the right to tear up the agreement and start tariffing goods under CUSMA. And that's how this all started. Eventually, talks came to be, this, that, the other, and Trump and the administration said, okay, we won't touch anything under CUSMA. We're going to touch these industries and really have a really targeted impact on the industries that are not protected under CUSMA. And that's what they've gone and done. What Hawkstra, I believe, is getting to here, again, there's going to be some more in-depth conversation around it because it is a little nuanced. But what I understand is that Canada just simply reacted. Canada said, okay, you're going to tariff us, then we're going to tariff everything. And some of those goods happen to be under CUSMA. And that's exactly what Pete Hawkstra is getting at here, is Canada came out hot and heavy right from the get-go, says, okay, that's how it's going to go, then we're going to tariff you right back, thinking they had standing to be able to do so. Then they filed complaints under Chapter 31, filed complaints with WTO, World Trade Organization, and trying to see if something could be made, something could be figured out here. But since then, they've kept those tariffs on some CUSMA goods in place, and that's what Pete Hawkstra is getting at. And so if you understand how that all goes, yes, Canada was the first to kind of react, thinking they had standing to be able to do what they've done. Then they filed the proper junctions in terms of the guardrails that Pete Hawkstra refers to here. And that's still kind of in limbo at the moment. And so they've just said, well, we're going to keep them on. So those are the irritants and things that Hawkstra is getting at, I believe, here in this case, as best I can understand the law and how this all goes down. So obviously, if you're the Canadian perspective, you think you have justification based on how Trump has been acting, quote unquote, to do what you've done. In this case, U.S. believes they've relented and says, okay, we'll not touch anything under CUSMA and we'll be fair and we'll just target these industries instead. That's still not okay with Canada. So both sides are saying it's unfair. Both sides are technically correct to a degree. And that was what got everyone going. But I think we get to the final point of what Pete Hawkstra got to in this interview, is that the way that Canada is operating is bringing CUSMA, USMCA, into question, which was a pretty tough thing to hear. If I'm being completely honest, it was tough to hear. It's like, whoa, that's our biggest trading partner who's saying that right now. That's supposed to be our ally who's saying that right now. And a big free trade agreement with the United States is huge for Canada. As we've seen, this is why it's putting us in so much pain right now, having all these sectoral tariffs right now, as we're seeing all the subsidies start being shelled out. It is going exactly how we thought it was going to go. CBC even took notice of it here, right? Where they said, whoa, did he just say that? Is that a threat? Is that a threat? What is he saying? CUSMA's being made into question. Because if CUSMA doesn't remain intact the way it is, or it improves for both sides, it could be very ugly for Canada by next year if this doesn't get renegotiated properly. It is fascinating. You have a year to start getting your ducks in a row, Canada, because whatever happens with those negotiations, you got to make sure you start building those pipelines, start building your infrastructure, because it could get ugly really quick if we don't start straightening out what things are going on and trying to at least figure out the irritants on both sides, coming to the table and having an honest conversation, because that's what we're seeing is rhetoric from Canada, and there's going to be some rhetoric from the United States. This is how this all goes, is trying to get your point of view out there to the masses. But again, at the same time, the masses that Canada keeps reaching out to is just mainly Canada. Then you have Ford that hops on CNN. But the reality is, if you're trying to move the needle a little bit and you're a Canadian, you should be hopping on the American podcasters. I'll say it would make a drastic difference for the likes of Doug Ford, Danielle Smith, even if she wanted to jump in on this, or those who want Mark Carney. Don't even show up on my show. Go down, be on Tim Pool's show. Talk to Americans about this. If you want to sway hearts and minds, go on the core American, viewed as right-wing podcasters, and have a conversation. Do what Gavin Newsom did with Charlie Kirk. Show some courage. But that's the thing, is I don't think that's what you really want. You like to be in the gray. You like to obfuscate. You like to work around details and utter falsehoods where you can to initiate doubt among people. And that's what gets people like me scratching their heads and concerned. I haven't seen a whole lot of Mark Carney talking about these issues. And then when it is, it's in a threatening tone. There's not really a whole lot of information what's going on with these negotiations. When there is questions about these negotiations, it's don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. Which means, shows me this Liberal Party loves to hide. They love to play in the gray. And as we've seen with the military spending that came out yesterday, well, we'll spend $9 billion on our military, even though half of it's all going to green initiatives, not actually going towards our military itself. That's how this all goes, right? It is fascinating. And back to when it comes to what China's done in terms of hitting our canola industry really hard and targeting our farmers in a significant way, which again, we're not seeing a whole lot of. And I would say these tariffs on our canola and our farmers is even more hard-hitting because canola is one of our bigger industries here in this country. And you're not hearing a dang thing about it, which comes down to the politics of Canada, where anything that impacts Eastern Canada, mainly Ontario, Quebec, gets all the focus of Ottawa. Anything that impacts the West, nothing gets talked about. And the fact that we're getting two superpowers, economic superpowers, focused on us right now is not good for little old Canada. And I'll end off with this amazing post from Ron Butler, the mortgage guy. He says, how overregulation destroys Canada. Other nations will surpass us through common sense. Last week, a First Nations announced its unwavering opposition to any mining in Ontario's Ring of Fire, a swath of Northern Ontario rich in minerals. Since 2014, Ontario has promised a road just to get this key location rich in critical minerals in the West desperately needs to replace China's total dominance of this resource. Yeah, if China wanted to, it could cut off the whole world from these vital elements. The U.S. understands this and is encouraging production. Canada is so stupid. We have not even started planning the road for 21 years. Not even kidding. Ontario and Canada are so totally inept and stupid, we couldn't even do something as simple as build a road so mining these vital minerals can even be contemplated. Now, First Nations say no. No mining ever. Although an incredibly high bribe might change minds. I hate the Chinese government. They are a murderous dictatorship that schemes to enslave the world. But no one says they don't understand the future. The future needs energy, so they're building power plants. 323 coal-fired power plants scheduled so far, and building a massive hydroelectric project through a series of dams on Himalayan rivers. Likely will displace 150,000 people and destroy local species. China doesn't care. All for a bigger power grid. I don't want Canada to be China, but I want Canada to stop being dumb. We are lulled by decades of prosperity that's been rapidly fading in the last 15 years. Bad policy can destroy a successful country, just ask Venezuela, Argentina, and South Africa. And someone commented on this thread of his, and I think it was very interesting, by David Nickel. It says, why is for the greater good, quote unquote, argument trotted out for vaccines, fire safety, but never for economic growth? And that's a fair point there. But Ron Butler hits a lot of truths here. We are getting smoked on an international level in so many ways. And we keep doing the same things that's hurting us over and over and over again. And I like how he was very unapologetic in his description of China. They are a murderous dictatorship. They don't like us. They quite frankly hate us. They want to crush us. And we just are helping them do it. There's a reason why the United Front is operating in BC. There's a reason why the United Front has been getting into the inner circles of the Liberal Party of Canada, including Mark Carney. There's a reason why this is all happening, and we can't really trust him. I'm sorry. People can complain the Conservatives are bought off by MAGA and the United States. They can say that. There's so little proof of the case. Just look how Donald Trump was like, yeah, I want Mark Carney to win. It's simple. People that you hate, people the left hates, wanted Mark Carney to win. And then people you should hate in China, who puts people in the concentration camps in 2025. You're allowing to work with impunity. You're allowing to come into Canadian soil and put bounties on the heads of our elected officials or those vying for office in this country. And you just allow it to happen because of your side wanting to win. It's crazy to watch this all happen. And I'm on board with what Ron Butler is saying here. It's time to start being smart and stop being stupid. But we'll see where all this goes. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.